Staring out at a beautiful, deadly world, I was beginning to understand I might not want to leave. I didn't sleep well. Dreams plagued me, half memories of the day mixed with nightmare imagery of teeth and blood and being chased through endless corridors by things with too many limbs. When dawn broke, or whatever passed for dawn at Thornhaven, I woke exhausted and disoriented. Aldrich brought breakfast on a silver tray, eggs, toast, coffee that smelled like heaven. The princess requests your presence in the entry hall in 1 hour. Dress practically. You'll be going into town. Town? I sat up. Raven's Hollow? Indeed. Lady Seraphina believes you should see how vampires and humans coexist before you make your final decision. His expression suggested he thought this was a terrible idea. Try not to cause an incident. An hour later, dressed in more casual clothing from my mysteriously well-stocked wardrobe, jeans, a sturdy shirt, a jacket, I met Seraphina in the entry hall. She'd also dressed down, wearing leather pants and a simple dark shirt, though she still wore her armor over top. A sword hung at her hip, and I noticed she had several other weapons concealed about her person. Are we expecting trouble? I asked nervously. Always expect trouble, she replied. But no, this is just standard equipment. You don't walk around unarmed in my world. Ever. She looked me over critically. You're too exposed. Here. She handed me a leather vest similar to hers. It's enchanted. Won't stop a sword thrust, but it'll protect against minor cuts and claws. Comforting, I muttered, putting it on. We left Thornhaven on foot, walking down a path that wound through the forest. Morning light filtered through the trees, though it felt wrong somehow, too dim, too diffuse, as if the forest itself was swallowing the sunlight before it could reach the ground. Vampires can walk in daylight, Seraphina explained, seeing my confusion. That's a myth born from our preference for darkness. Sunlight doesn't burn us or kill us. It just weakens us considerably. Makes us slow, vulnerable. So we avoid it when possible and use it strategically when necessary. She gestured to the forest around us. Thornhaven's forest is ancient. The trees have grown so dense over centuries that very little direct sunlight penetrates. It's effectively permanent twilight here, which suits us perfectly. As we walked, I noticed signs of habitation, carved stones marking territory, small shrines made of bones and flowers, symbols painted on tree trunks in something dark. What are those? Protection wards. Border markers. Warnings to predators that this forest is claimed and defended. She paused by one particular symbol, 3 circles overlapping with a thorn through the center. This is my mark. It tells anything intelligent enough to read it that this territory falls under my protection and that trespassers will be dealt with permanently. Are there really things out here that need warnings? I asked, then immediately felt stupid. Of course there were. I'd seen the carnivorous roses. I'd been told about the things in the hedge maze. The forest beyond Thornhaven's boundaries is wild in ways human-controlled lands haven't been for centuries, Seraphina said. Feral vampires who've lost their minds to bloodlust. Rogue werewolves. Fae who hunt for sport. Things older and stranger that don't have proper names in modern languages. The only reason Raven's Hollow survives is because we enforce the borders. We keep the true monsters away. We emerged from the forest onto a hillside overlooking the town. Raven's Hollow spread below us, a surprisingly functional medieval meets modern settlement. Stone buildings with thatched roofs next to more recent construction with glass windows and solar panels. People moved through the streets, actual people going about their days. From this distance it could have been any small town. They know, Seraphina said, anticipating my question. Everyone who lives in Raven's Hollow knows exactly what we are. The deal is simple. We protect them from external supernatural threats, and they provide us with willing blood donors, labor for estate maintenance, and a buffer zone between us and the wider human world. No one is forced to stay. Anyone who wants to leave can leave. But most choose to stay because life here is safer than anywhere else. We descended into town, and I braced myself for fearful stares or hostile reactions. Instead, people greeted Seraphina with respect that seemed genuine rather than forced. Lady Drakenmore, an older woman, called from a shop doorway. Good to see you. How's your father? Well, Mrs. Chin, thank you. Serafina's entire demeanor had softened slightly. How's your grandson? I heard he was ill. Better, thanks to your doctor. That medicine she provided worked wonders. The woman's eyes shifted to me, curious but not afraid. Is this your young man? The one everyone's talking about. This is Callum, Serafina confirmed, not correcting the assumption. I'm showing him around, helping him understand how we live. Well, welcome to Raven's Hollow, Callum, Mrs. Chin said warmly. If Lady Drakemore chose you, you must be something special. She's got a good eye for character, that one. As we walked through the town, I saw more of the same. Genuine interaction, mutual respect, cooperation. A man repairing a roof called down a greeting. Children played in a square, laughing and carefree. A market bustled with activity, selling everything from vegetables to handcrafted goods. This isn't what I expected, I admitted. What did you expect? Cowering peasants? Humans kept as cattle? Serafina's tone was dry. That's the Hollywood version. The reality is more nuanced. We need blood to survive, yes. But we don't need to kill for it. Willing donors provide more than enough, and in exchange we offer something most humans desperately want: security. We stopped at a small clinic, a surprisingly modern building tucked between medieval architecture. Inside, a vampire I didn't recognize was examining a young woman's arm while she chatted about her week. Dr. Valeska is one of our oldest residents, Serafina explained. She was a physician in life 300 years ago. Now she treats the humans of Raven's Hollow for everything from common colds to serious injuries. Her knowledge of medicine spans centuries. Where else would they get that kind of expertise? But why? I asked. Why provide all this? Protection, medical care, infrastructure. What do you gain beyond blood? Serafina led me back outside toward a building that looked like it might be a town hall. Because the alternative is chaos. Vampires who view humans purely as prey eventually draw attention from hunters, from governments, from rival supernatural factions. We've learned over centuries that sustainable coexistence benefits everyone. We get reliable resources and political stability. They get protection from things that would otherwise destroy them. It's not altruism. It's enlightened self-interest. Inside the town hall, we found a meeting in progress. A mix of humans and vampires sat around a table, discussing what sounded like water infrastructure repairs. They nodded to Serafina as we entered but continued their discussion without interruption. Joint council, she explained quietly. 3 humans, 3 vampires. They make decisions about town management, resource allocation, conflict resolution. Everyone gets a voice. I watched the discussion unfold, seeing humans disagreeing with vampires, seeing those disagreements resolved through debate rather than force. It was so normal, so functional that it made my head spin. We left the town hall and walked toward the outskirts of Raven's Hollow, where the buildings grew sparser and the forest pressed closer. Serafina's hand drifted to her sword, and I felt tension return to her body. There's something you need to understand about the choice you'll have to make, she said, her voice serious. Becoming a vampire isn't just about gaining powers or living forever. It's about responsibility. Every vampire at Thornhaven is responsible for maintaining the balance. We patrol the borders. We respond to threats. We put ourselves between humans and things that would tear them apart. As if summoned by her words, I heard something moving in the trees ahead. Branches snapping. A low, guttural sound that raised every hair on my body. Serafina's sword was in her hand instantly. Stay behind me, she ordered, her entire demeanor shifting from guide to warrior. Don't run. Don't make noise. And whatever you see, don't scream. The thing that emerged from the forest was nightmare-made flesh. It stood 8 feet tall, covered in matted fur and exposed muscle, with a head that looked vaguely canine but twisted wrong. Its eyes glowed yellow-green, and its teeth were like broken glass shards. The smell hit me a second later, rot and blood and something acidic. Feral werewolf, Serafina said calmly, though I noticed she positioned herself fully between me and the creature. Lost to the beast, mine gone. It's been hunting near the borders for 2 days. I've been tracking it. The werewolf snarled, taking a step forward. Serafina didn't move, didn't show fear, just watched with calculating eyes. You have one chance, she told it, her voice carrying despite being barely above a whisper. Return to the deep forest and I'll let you live. Come closer to town and I'll put you down. It lunged. What happened next happened too fast for me to fully process. Serafina moved like liquid lightning, her sword describing an arc that caught moonlight even in full day. The werewolf's momentum carried it past her, and it crashed to the ground missing its head, which rolled to a stop 3 feet away. The body twitched once, twice, then dissolved into ash that scattered in a breeze I didn't feel. Serafina cleaned her blade on the grass and sheathed it. That's what we do, she said quietly. That's what I've done for 600 years. Patrol the boundaries. Kill the things that would kill others. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting anymore. It's just necessary. My legs had turned to water. I just watched a woman I'd had dinner with decapitate a monster without breaking a sweat. That was a mercy, she corrected. It was suffering lost to madness, dangerous to everything around it. Death was kindness. She looked at me and her eyes held something I hadn't seen before, weariness. This is what immortality means for vampires like me. Endless cycles of violence. Constant vigilance. Being the thin line between civilization and chaos. If you become one of us, this will be your responsibility too. Not immediately, young vampires need decades to develop the strength and skill, but eventually. Could you do it? Could you kill when necessary to protect others? I thought about lying, about giving the answer she might want to hear. But I'd promised myself honesty. I don't know. I've never been in a position where violence was the answer. But I think if something was threatening innocent people, if there was no other option, maybe. I don't want to find out, but maybe. That's more honest than most would be, she said. Come on. There's one more thing I want you to see. We walked back into town, but this time to a cemetery on the far side. It was well maintained, flowers growing between headstones that ranged from ancient to recent. Serafina led me to a particular grave, its stone worn smooth by centuries. Ilara Drakenmore, she said softly. My younger sister. She chose mortality over transformation. Lived as a human, married a human, had children. Died at age 73 surrounded by family. I was there when it happened. I looked at the dates carved into stone. 1401 to 1474. Over 500 years ago, but the way Serafina spoke about it made it sound recent. You miss her. Every day. Even now. She touched the headstone gently. She was the brave one, Callum. She chose the harder path, knowing she would age and die while her family remained unchanged. But she also got something I never will, the satisfaction of a complete human life. Children, grandchildren, the natural progression of time. She told me near the end that she didn't regret her choice. That knowing her time was limited made her treasure every moment. Like what I said at dinner, I realized. About time giving life urgency. Yes. Serafina turned to look at me. I'm showing you all this, the town, the monster, the grave, because I want you to understand both sides of the choice. Become vampire and you gain power, longevity, purpose. But you lose mortality, humanity, the natural end that gives life shape. Stay human and you keep all the things that make you what you are. But you die and you miss the chance to see and do things beyond mortal comprehension. What would you choose? I asked. If you could go back, knowing what you know now, would you still choose to become vampire? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her sister's grave. Yes, she said finally. But I also understand why Ilara chose differently. There's no right answer, Callum. Only the answer that's right for you. We stood there in silence, surrounded by the dead, contemplating choices that didn't have clear solutions. And for the first time since sitting in that catastrophic seat, I felt the weight of the decision not as panic but as genuine consideration. What did I want? Who did I want to be? And was I brave enough to choose, knowing either choice came with irreversible consequences? The days blurred together after that first excursion to Raven's Hollow. Serafina established a routine for me, combat training in the mornings, lessons with Nadia in the afternoons, dinners with various members of the Thornhaven court in the evenings. It was exhausting but also strangely exhilarating. I was learning things no human researcher had ever been permitted to know. A week into my stay, Nadia summoned me to a part of the library I hadn't seen before. The entrance was hidden behind a bookshelf that swung open like a door, revealing a descending spiral staircase lit by floating orbs of blue light. "This is the restricted section," Nadia explained as we descended. "The knowledge down here is dangerous, either because it's powerful enough to be weaponized or because understanding it changes you in fundamental ways. Lord Matthias gave permission for you to access it, given your unique circumstances." We emerged into a circular chamber that took my breath away. Books floated everywhere, dozens, hundreds of them drifting through the air like paper birds. But these were different from the ones upstairs. These books seemed alive, their pages whispering as they turned, their covers pulsing with faint light. "These are grimoires," Nadia said, gesturing to the floating volumes. "Spellbooks, histories, forbidden texts. This 1 inch," she pulled a book from the air with a gesture, "contains every known method of vampire creation across the centuries. This one has true names of demons. This one holds the location of every major supernatural nexus point on Earth." She reshelled them with obvious reverence. "Normally this knowledge is restricted to the most senior vampires and the most skilled witches. You get access because you need to understand what you'd be becoming." She led me to a reading desk and 3 books floated down to land before me. "These are what Serafina requested I show you. The first is a medical text documenting the physiological changes during vampire transformation. The second is a collection of accounts from humans who chose to turn. Their reasons, their experiences, their regrets if any. The third is harder to classify. It's a philosophical treatise on immortality and consciousness, written by a vampire who lived for 4,000 years before choosing to walk into the sun." "Suicide?" I asked, startled. "Self-determined end," Nadia corrected. "Vampires can choose death if they decide their existence has run its course. It's rare but it happens. This particular vampire, his name was Aramis, wanted to leave behind his understanding of what it meant to live for millennia. What changes in your psychology? What you lose and what you unexpectedly gain. It's required reading for anyone considering transformation." I opened the first book and the pages seemed to glow at my touch. The text was in Latin, but as I read, I realized it was clinical in a way that modern medical texts would recognize. Detailed anatomical diagrams showing how vampire venom restructured human physiology. Descriptions of the death process, because you did die, the heart stopped, the lungs ceased, brain activity ended. And then came the rebirth, powered by the vampire blood and venom, reanimating the corpse as something new. Something that looked human but fundamentally wasn't. "It takes 3 days, Nadia said quietly. 3 days of death while the venom rewrites your biology. Most humans describe it as the worst pain imaginable, followed by a euphoria beyond description when you wake up changed. But you wake up hungry, desperately hungry, and if there's no one to guide you, you can lose yourself to bloodlust in the first hours." "Has that ever happened?" I asked. "Someone transforming and losing control?" "Yes. It's why vampire creation is highly regulated. The maker is responsible for their progeny for the first century of existence. If the new vampire causes problems, kills indiscriminately, exposes our existence, violates our laws, both are punished. It's a serious commitment." I moved to the second book, reading accounts from humans who'd chosen transformation. Their reasons varied wildly. Love for a vampire partner, fear of death, desire for power, curiosity about immortality, terminal illness, escaping persecution. But common themes emerged. Most described the first decades as overwhelming, heightened senses making everything too much, bloodthirst being harder to control than expected, watching former mortal friends and family age and die while you remained unchanged. But many also described it as eventually worthwhile. The ability to pursue knowledge for centuries. The formation of bonds that lasted lifetimes plural. The satisfaction of mastering skills to a level impossible in a single human lifespan. The perspective that came from watching civilizations rise and fall, understanding the long patterns of history. One account particularly struck me. A woman named Catherine who'd been transformed in 1823 wrote, "I do not know if I made the right choice. How could anyone know? But I made my choice and I have done my best to live it with purpose. That is all any being, mortal or immortal, can do." The third book was the most challenging. Aramis's philosophical treatise was dense, written in a combination of ancient Greek and Arabic, but Nadia had provided a translation. I read passages about the malleability of identity across millennia, about the necessity of constantly choosing new purposes because old ones inevitably lost meaning, about the strange relationship immortals developed with mortal beings, simultaneously envying their urgency and pitying their brevity. One passage made me pause. The mortal error is assuming immortals have overcome death. We have not. We have merely postponed it indefinitely. It still waits, patient and inevitable, for the day we choose to stop running. Heavy stuff, I said finally, closing the book. Serafina wanted you to read that one specifically, Nadia said. She said you needed to understand that immortality isn't escape, it's just a different set of problems. Why is she being so educational about this? I asked. If she wants me to choose transformation, wouldn't it make more sense to sell it as nothing but benefits? Nadia gave me a look that suggested I was being deliberately dense. Because she respects you enough to want you to make an informed choice. If you choose transformation based on lies or incomplete information, you'll resent her eventually. Better you understand the full reality and choose accordingly, even if that means choosing death. That's surprisingly principled for someone who supposedly captured me as entertainment. Did she say that? Nadia asked, tilting her head. Or did her family assume that, and she didn't bother correcting them because explaining her actual reasoning would be more complicated? I thought back to the dinner conversation. She said I interested her. That I was unexpected. Exactly. Not that you entertained her. That you interested her. There's a difference. Nadia pulled out a chair and sat across from me. Serafina is 600 years old, Callum. In that time she's been courted by literally hundreds of vampires, warriors, scholars, nobles, artists. She rejected all of them. Do you know why? Because they bored her? Because they were predictable. Every one of them approached her with the same basic framework. Impress her with power, demonstrate worthiness, follow proper courtship protocol. They treated her like a prize to be won through achievement. Nadia leaned forward. You treated her like a person. You didn't know who she was when you sat down. You weren't trying to court her or impress her. You just made a mistake and then dealt with the consequences as honestly as you could. That's what caught her attention. So what, this whole bonding claim is genuine? She actually wants to bind herself to a random human she just met. I don't think she knows what she wants yet, Nadia admitted. I think she's using the month to figure that out, not just whether you're suitable but whether she actually wants a consort at all. You're a catalyst, Callum. Your presence is forcing her to examine questions she's been avoiding for centuries. That's a lot of pressure, I said weakly. Yes. But also an opportunity. Nadia stood, gesturing to the floating books. You have access to knowledge here that humans dream about. You're being trained by one of the greatest warriors of any species. You're seeing behind the veil that separates the mundane from the supernatural. Whether you choose transformation or death at the end of the month, you're living something extraordinary right now. She was right, and that realization hit me like cold water. I'd been so focused on escape, on proving myself unworthy, that I'd missed what was actually happening. I was being given an unprecedented education in supernatural reality. If I survived this, through either transformation or some miracle escape, I would understand things about the world that no other mortal researcher had ever confirmed. I want to learn more, I said, surprised by the conviction in my own voice. Everything. All of it. Can you teach me? Nadia's smile was brilliant. Finally. I was wondering when you'd stop trying to fail and start trying to understand. She gestured, and dozens more books descended from their floating patterns to stack on the desk. We have 3 weeks left. Let's not waste them. What followed were the most intellectually intense weeks of my life. Nadia taught me supernatural theory, the underlying principles that govern how magic, vampirism, lycanthropy, and other transformations actually worked. Not folklore, not superstition, but testable, repeatable principles that scholars from multiple supernatural species had verified over centuries. I learned that vampirism was a symbiotic infection, a magically enhanced microorganism that bonded with human tissue and fundamentally restructured it at the cellular level. I learned that different vampiric bloodlines carried different traits because the original progenitors had been infected with slightly different variants of the base organism. I learned that the weaknesses, running water, silver, specific herbs, weren't universal but were instead tied to the specific characteristics of each bloodline's variant. I studied the political structures of supernatural society, the complex web of treaties and feuds between vampire courts, werewolf packs, fey kingdoms, witch covens and other factions. I learned about the Accords, the international supernatural law that maintained an uneasy peace between species. I learned about the Veil, the coordinated effort by all major factions to keep supernatural existence secret from the majority of humanity. And I learned about the Hunters, humans and supernaturals who dedicated themselves to destroying anything they deemed monstrous. Nadia showed me records of hunts, purges, massacres on both sides of the conflict. She didn't romanticize either side. Vampires could be cruel predators. Hunters could be genocidal fanatics. Both contained individuals trying to do what they thought was right, and both contained monsters who used righteousness as an excuse for atrocity. The world is more complicated than either your human history books or vampire propaganda would have you believe, Nadia said. Both sides have committed horrors. Both sides have produced heroes. The only truth is that survival requires constant negotiation between opposing interests. Serafina occasionally joined these study sessions, adding practical context to theoretical knowledge. She told me stories from her 6 centuries, battles she'd fought, treaties she'd negotiated, mistakes she'd made and lessons she'd learned. She didn't glorify it, but she also didn't apologize for it. This was her existence, and she'd made peace with what that required. "You're absorbing this faster than I expected," she observed during one session. We were in the Tower Observatory, looking at maps that showed supernatural territory claims across Europe. Most humans exposed to this information experience a kind of cognitive breakdown. The paradigm shift is too dramatic. But you're integrating it. I spent years studying this as mythology, I reminded her. I already had frameworks for vampires, werewolves, magic. I just had to adjust them to match reality instead of folklore. Still, it's impressive. She pointed to a region on the map marked in crimson. This is our territory, the Northern Covens. We control everything from the Scottish Highlands to the Baltic states. Approximately 40 million humans live under our nominal protection, though most don't know it. We maintain the Veil, enforce the Accords, and keep more aggressive factions from turning our territory into a war zone. 40 million, I repeated, staggered by the scale. How is that possible without humans knowing? Most of our work is invisible. We stop threats before they become visible. The feral werewolf I killed? If I hadn't, it might have killed a few humans before someone else stopped it. Those deaths would have been reported as animal attacks or unexplained murders. Tragedy but localized. No one would have connected them to a larger supernatural conflict. She traced a line on the map. But occasionally things get out of hand. Wars between factions. Ambitious vampires trying to expand territory. Fae deciding to amuse themselves with mortal suffering. Those situations require more direct intervention. Have you fought in wars? I asked. Many. Her expression was distant. The worst was 1847, the Crimson Winter. A coalition of rogue vampires tried to overthrow the established courts, believing they could create a new order with humans as overt slaves rather than hidden partners. The war lasted 3 months and killed thousands on both sides. I personally killed 173 enemy vampires. She said it without pride or shame, just as fact. We won barely. The rogue coalition was destroyed and we reinforced the Accords to make such uprisings harder to organize. But the cost. I still remember all their faces. All 173. The weight of that settled over the room like snow. 173 people. Monsters maybe, but still people with their own motives and histories, dead by her hand. The scale of violence required to maintain the balance she described was staggering. "Do you regret it?" I asked quietly. "Every death. Even the ones that were necessary." She turned from the map to look at me. "That's the burden of being a warrior, Callum. You do what's required, what serves the greater good. But you don't get to pretend it doesn't cost you something. Everyone I've killed has taken a piece of my humanity with them. That's the price of immortality and power." In that moment, I saw her not as the deadly princess or the supernatural warrior, but as someone carrying an almost unbearable weight. 600 years of violence, of necessary deaths, of choosing the lesser evil over and over until the choices blurred together into a long, bloody road with no end in sight. "I don't know if I could do that," I admitted. "Carry that weight. You wouldn't have to. Not for decades at least. Young vampires are kept away from serious combat until they've had time to develop the mental fortitude for it. And not every vampire becomes a warrior. Some become scholars, artists, craftspeople. They contribute to our society in different ways." She moved closer, and I found myself looking into those crimson eyes, seeing depths I'd been too frightened to notice before. "But you would need to understand that this life requires sacrifice. Not just the sacrifice of your mortality, but ongoing sacrifices. Comfort. These simple pleasures. The weight of knowledge and responsibility." "Why do you continue?" I asked. "If it's so hard, if it costs so much, why not just stop? Walk away?" "Because someone has to," she said simply. "Someone has to stand between the monsters and the innocent. Someone has to maintain order, enforce rules, prevent chaos. If not me, then who? If all the powerful, skilled vampires abandoned their responsibilities to pursue personal pleasure, the entire system would collapse. Millions would die, humans and supernaturals alike." She smiled sadly. "That's what immortality means for those of us with power. Not freedom, but obligation that never ends." I thought about that for a long time after she left. About duty and responsibility, about the weight of power, about what it meant to choose a life of endless obligation to others. My previous life had been comfortable in its smallness. My research mattered to me and to my academic community, but the stakes were minimal. No one lived or died based on my dissertation. But this was a life where every choice echoed across centuries, where every decision could mean life or death for hundreds or thousands of people. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. It was also, I was beginning to realize, perhaps the most meaningful existence I could imagine. The final week arrived faster than I expected. Time, which had felt suspended in those first terrifying days, suddenly accelerated. I found myself noticing small things, the way sunlight, filtered through ancient trees, felt on my skin, the taste of food, the simple act of breathing. All things I would lose if I chose transformation. But I also noticed other things. The ease with which Serafina moved through the world, the depth of knowledge that came from centuries of experience, the satisfaction in her voice when she spoke about protecting Raven's Hollow and maintaining the boundaries. There was purpose there, profound purpose. 3 days before the blood moon, Serafina invited me to join her for evening training. But instead of combat practice, she led me to a room I hadn't seen before. A meditation chamber, circular and calm, lit only by candles and moonlight through a glass ceiling. "Sit," she instructed, settling into a cross-legged position. I mirrored her. "I want to try something. With your permission." "What kind of something?" "A mental link. Temporary, superficial. It would allow you to experience my perspective for a few moments, feel what it's like to exist as I do. It won't hurt, and I won't be able to access your deeper thoughts. Just sharing sensory experience." She watched my face. "It would help you make your decision with more complete information." I considered refusing. The intimacy of it was frightening. But I'd come this far, learned this much. "Okay. Yes. Do it." She reached across the space between us, taking my hands in hers. Her skin was cold as always, smooth as marble. "Close your eyes. Breathe. Open your mind." I felt her presence brush against my consciousness, not invasive but definitely there. And then, the world exploded into impossible sensation. Everything was sharper. I could hear conversations happening in Raven's Hollow, miles away. could smell individual flowers in the garden, distinguish between 50 different varieties of rose by scent alone. The candle flames were nearly blinding, each one a brilliant star. And beneath it all, a constant, thrumming awareness of life, heartbeats, blood flowing through veins, the warm pulse of mortality all around. But there was also emptiness. My own heartbeat was absent, replaced by nothing. Not silence but absence. The lack of breath unless I chose to breathe. The coldness of my own flesh. And underneath everything, a hunger. Not overwhelming, not uncontrollable, but present. Always present. The need for blood, managed and controlled but never truly gone. This is every moment of my existence, Serafina's mental voice explained. The heights and the deficits. The power and the cost. I felt her strength. The confidence of knowing she could protect those under her care, the satisfaction of competence perfected over centuries. But I also felt her weariness, the weight of endless responsibility, the loneliness of being fundamentally different from mortals, the strange isolation of knowing everyone she might care about would eventually die or grow too old to relate to her anymore. And beneath it all, I felt her curiosity about me. Her genuine interest in my reactions, my choices, my strange mortal perspective on her immortal world. She found me fascinating in the same way I found ancient manuscripts fascinating, a window into a way of thinking she'd forgotten or never fully understood. The connection broke and I gasped, suddenly back in my own body with its beating heart and breathing lungs and human limitations. It felt simultaneously confining and comforting, like putting on familiar clothes after wearing something that didn't quite fit. I couldn't find words. Overwhelming, Serafina supplied. Now you understand why transformation takes guidance. Waking up to those senses without preparation would drive most humans mad. She released my hands. But you also understand the benefits, the depth of experience, the potential. And the cost, I added. The hunger, the emptiness, the loneliness. Yes. She stood, moving to the window to look out at her domain. I won't pretend it's easy, Callum. Immortality is a gift and a burden in equal measure. But it's also honest. You know exactly what you're choosing if you choose it. What do you want me to choose? I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. I want you to choose what's true for you. I've enjoyed this month. Enjoyed teaching you, talking with you, watching you adapt to impossible circumstances with grace and intelligence. If you choose transformation, I believe we could build something meaningful together. A partnership based on mutual respect and genuine interest. She turned to face me. But if you choose mortality, if you decide this life isn't for you, I'll respect that too. I'll ensure your death is painless and your body is returned to your home with evidence of natural causes. Your family will never know what happened here. Those are my only options? Become a vampire or die. The law is absolute, she said, regret coloring her voice. You know too much to return to mortal life. The risk to the veil is too great. I'm sorry, Callum. I truly am. I wanted to rage against the injustice of it. Wanted to argue that I'd done nothing wrong, that sitting in the wrong chair shouldn't carry a death sentence. But I also understood. I'd seen enough in the past month to know that supernatural society operated on different rules, harsher rules, because the consequences of exposure or chaos were so catastrophic. I need time to think, I said. You have 3 days. The blood moon rises on the equinox. That's when the ritual must be performed if you choose transformation, or when. She didn't finish the sentence. Spend the time however you wish. Read, explore, meditate. I'll be available if you want to talk. She left me in the meditation chamber, alone with my thoughts and the weight of an impossible choice. I spent the next 2 days in a haze of contemplation. I walked the gardens, carefully avoiding the carnivorous roses, sat in the library reading accounts of transformation, talked with Nadia about the nature of consciousness and identity. I even had a surprisingly philosophical conversation with Lord Matthias, who told me that choosing mortality was not cowardice if it was an authentic choice. The bravest vampire I ever knew chose to walk into the sun after 3,000 years, he said. She decided she had experienced everything she wanted to experience and was ready to end. That took more courage than any battle I've fought. Courage isn't about choosing life, it's about choosing consciously. The night before the blood moon, I found myself back on the balcony where Serafina had first shown me the gardens by moonlight. The estate spread below, beautiful and deadly, a world I'd never imagined existed. I thought about my life before Thornhaven. The small apartment. The academic career. The plans for a future that seemed safe and predictable. I thought I was chasing knowledge, but in truth I'd been chasing safety. The security of understanding things from a distance, without risk, without real consequence. This world, Serafina's world, was the opposite. Everything here had weight. Every choice mattered. Every moment was lived with the awareness of power and responsibility and genuine consequence. I thought about Catherine's words from her transformation account. I made my choice and I have done my best to live it with purpose. What did I want? Not what was safe, not what was expected, but what did I actually want? The answer came quietly, without fanfare or dramatic revelation. I wanted to understand. I wanted to learn everything this world could teach me. I wanted to stand beside Serafina, not as a rescued mortal but as a genuine partner. I wanted to live with purpose, even if that purpose came with weight and sacrifice and endless obligation. I wanted to choose the harder path because it was the meaningful one. You've decided? Serafina's voice came from behind me. She must have sensed my resolution, or perhaps she'd been watching me this whole time. I turned to face her. Yes. And? I choose transformation, I said, and saying it aloud made it real. I choose to become vampire. To bond with you. To learn this life and contribute to it however I can. I expected relief or satisfaction on her face. Instead, I saw something more complex. Joy mixed with concern, hope tempered with worry. Are you certain? This isn't reversible, Callum. Once you begin the transformation, there's no going back. You will die, and what wakes up will be something new. I understand. And I'm certain. I stepped closer to her. This month, you've given me something I didn't know I needed, purpose beyond academic curiosity. The chance to be part of something larger than myself. I don't want to walk away from that. I don't want to return to a small, safe life when I've seen what else is possible. Serafina smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. Then tomorrow night, under the blood moon, we'll perform the bonding ritual. You'll drink my blood and I'll drain yours. For 3 days you'll be dead, and I'll guard your body while the transformation completes. And when you wake, you'll be vampire. You'll be my consort. You'll be family. I'm ready, I said. She took my hand, and this time her cold touch didn't frighten me. No, you're not. No one is truly ready for death and rebirth. But you're willing and you're conscious of your choice. That's enough. We stood together on the balcony, mortal and vampire, watching the last night of my human life fade into darkness. Tomorrow everything would change. I would die. And in dying, I would be reborn into a life I couldn't fully imagine but was choosing to embrace. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. I realized with surprising clarity, exactly what I wanted. The blood moon rose crimson and enormous, tinting everything it touched with shades of copper and rust. I stood in the center of Thornhaven's ritual chamber, a space deep beneath the castle I hadn't known existed until Aldrich led me there an hour before sunset. The room was circular, carved from black stone, with channels cut into the floor forming intricate patterns. Candles burned at precise points around the perimeter, their flames unnaturally still despite the air moving through the space. Serafina's family assembled around the circle's edge, witnesses required by ancient law. Lord Matthias, Evangelina, Lucian, Celeste. Nadia stood near them, her amber eyes glowing brighter than usual, monitoring the magical elements of the ritual. And Serafina stood opposite me across the circle, wearing ceremonial armor I hadn't seen before. Silver and crimson, engraved with symbols that seemed to shift in the candlelight. This is your last chance, Lord Matthias announced formally. Callum Archer, do you enter this bonding of your own free will, understanding the consequences and accepting them without reservation? I do, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Serafina Drakenmore, do you claim this mortal as your intended consort, accepting responsibility for his transformation and his actions for the next century? I do, Serafina replied, her eyes never leaving mine. Then let the ritual begin. Serafina moved first, drawing a knife from her belt and cutting her palm without hesitation. Blood welled up, darker than human blood, nearly black in the crimson moonlight. She crossed the circle to stand before me, offering her bleeding hand. Drink, she said softly. Take my blood into you. Let it begin the change. I took her hand, raised it to my lips, and drank. The taste was indescribable, copper and roses and something electric that burned all the way down. My body reacted immediately, heat flooded through my veins, my heart accelerated, and I felt something fundamental beginning to shift in my cellular structure. Serafina's other hand came to rest on my shoulder, steadying me. Now comes the hard part, she whispered. Your death. She moved faster than I could process, and suddenly I was on the ground, her body covering mine, her face buried in my neck. I felt her fangs pierce my skin, sharp, clean pain, and then the pull as she began to drink. My blood left my body in steady draws, and with it went my warmth, my strength, my life. I'd expected panic, but instead felt strange calm. This was my choice. My transformation. My becoming. The world grew dim around the edges. Sounds became muffled. The pain faded into numbness. My heartbeat, which had been hammering, began to slow. Let go, Serafina's mental voice whispered in my fading consciousness. Don't fight it. Death is just a door. Step through. My heart stuttered. Beat once more. Twice. Then stopped. Everything went dark. I floated in nothing. No sensation, no thought, no awareness of time or space or self. Just absence. The void between existence and non-existence. But then, slowly, something began to build. A burning that started somewhere central, where my heart had been, and spread outward like fire through dry grass. The pain was immense, all-consuming, worse than anything I'd ever experienced. My body was being unmade and remade, cells dying and being replaced by something new, something other. I tried to scream, but I had no lungs, no voice. Tried to move, but I had no body, or rather, my body wasn't mine to command. I was trapped in the transformation, passenger to my own death and rebirth. Time lost meaning. The burning continued for what might have been hours or days or centuries. All I knew was pain and change and the slow, agonizing process of becoming. I woke violently, gasping for breath I didn't need, my eyes flying open to a world transformed. Everything was impossibly vivid. I could see individual dust motes floating in the air, could count the wood grain patterns on the ceiling far above, could perceive colors that didn't have names in human language. The candles burning nearby were brilliant stars, their light almost painful. And the sounds? I could hear everything, conversations happening in the castle above, mice moving in the walls, the whisper of fabric as someone shifted their weight. It was overwhelming, a sensory assault that made me want to shut down. Breathe, Serafina's voice cut through the chaos. She was beside me, her hand on my chest. It's overwhelming at first, but you'll learn to filter it. Focus on my voice. Just my voice. I tried to follow her instruction, but everything was too much, too intense. I sat up, moved faster than I intended, and found myself standing across the room without remembering the transition. My body responded to impulses before I fully formed them. Carefully, Serafina cautioned, approaching slowly. Your strength is enhanced beyond anything you're used to. You could accidentally break things, or people, if you're not conscious of your movements. I looked down at my hands. They looked the same shape, same size, but the skin was paler now, luminous. I could see the veins beneath, but they carried no blood, only the supernatural energy that powered vampire existence. How long? I asked, and my voice was wrong. Same tone, same timbre, but it carried further, resonated differently. 3 days as expected. It's evening of the 3rd day. The blood moon has set, but you've completed the transformation. She moved closer, studying my face with those crimson eyes. How do you feel? Strange. Wrong. Different. I struggled to articulate the sensations. Like I'm wearing someone else's body, but also like this is more fundamentally me than I've ever been. That's normal. The dissonance fades as you acclimate. She gestured to a mirror on the chamber wall. Look. See what you've become. I approached the mirror hesitantly, almost afraid of what I'd see. The face looking back at me was mine, but changed. Same features but perfected somehow. Symmetrical in ways human faces never quite achieve. And my eyes, they were no longer brown. They were crimson like Seraphina's, glowing faintly in the dim light. The eye color varies by bloodline, she explained. Mine runs to crimson. You're bound to me now, so you share the trait. Bound to her. The weight of that settled over me. This wasn't just transformation, it was connection. We were bonded, linked in ways I didn't fully understand yet. The hunger will hit you soon, Seraphina continued, all business now. We need to get you fed before it becomes overwhelming. Fresh blood from a willing donor. It's crucial that your first feeding be controlled and consensual. As if summoned by her words, I felt it, a gnawing emptiness in my core, a need so profound it bordered on pain. The hunger wasn't like any human hunger I'd experienced. It was fundamental, cellular, a drive as basic as breathing used to be. I feel it, I gasped, and suddenly I could smell something intoxicating. Blood. Warm, living blood pumping through Seraphina's veins despite her undead state. No, through someone else's veins. I turned and saw Aldrich standing near the chamber entrance. His blood called to me and the hunger surged. Seraphina moved between us instantly, her hand on my chest. Control, she commanded. You're stronger than the hunger. It's a tool you use, not a master you obey. Focus on my voice. Ground yourself. I struggled against the instinct to lunge past her, to reach the source of that intoxicating scent. But I remembered my choice, my resolution to embrace this life with purpose. I forced my body still, forced my mind to clarity despite the screaming need. Good, Seraphina said, approval in her voice. You're doing better than most newly turned. Come. We'll go to the feeding room. Proper donors, proper protocol. You'll satisfy the hunger without losing control. She guided me from the ritual chamber, her hand on my arm, both support and restraint. We climbed stairs that I navigated with supernatural ease, my body adapting to its new capabilities even as my mind struggled to catch up. The castle felt different now. I could sense its age, feel the weight of centuries soaked into the stone, perceive the boundaries of the protective magic Nadia maintained. The feeding room was small, intimate, with comfortable furniture and soft lighting. A woman waited there, mid-30s, calm expression, clearly familiar with this process. I could hear her heartbeat, smell the richness of her blood, and the hunger roared. This is Margaret, Seraphina introduced. She's one of our regular donors from Raven's Hollow. She knows what to expect and has consented freely to help with your first feeding. Margaret smiled at me, completely unafraid. Welcome to immortality, Lord Callum. Let's get you fed properly, shall we? The feeding was a blur of sensation. The pierce of fangs I was still learning to control, the rush of blood flooding my system, the satisfaction of the hunger being met. But beneath it all, I maintained awareness. This was a person, not prey. She was helping me, gifting me her blood, and I owed her respect and restraint. When the hunger faded to manageable levels, I pulled back, carefully sealing the small wounds with a lick as Seraphina had instructed. Margaret was pale but smiling, accepting the juice and cookies Seraphina offered to help her recover. You did well, Margaret told me. Controlled, gentle. Some newly turned are rougher. She stood, slightly unsteady but functional. Welcome to the community, Lord Callum. I expect we'll see more of you in Raven's Hollow soon. After she left, I collapsed onto one of the couches, my head spinning from sensory overload and the profound strangeness of having just drunk someone's blood. That was necessary, Seraphina finished. And you'll need to feed regularly, once every few days at first, spacing out to once a week as you gain control. Gets easier. The hunger becomes manageable. You learn to live with it. This is my existence now, I said, not quite a question. This is our existence, she corrected, sitting beside me. You're not alone in this, Callum. I'm your maker, your bondmate, your partner. We navigate immortality together. I looked at her, Really looked at her with my new vision that saw an impossible detail. She was beautiful, yes, but also scarred. I could see old wounds that had healed into pale lines across her skin, marks of 600 years of combat. I could see the weight she carried in the set of her shoulders, the ancient weariness in her eyes that momentarily lifted when she looked at me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you learn. For the next months, possibly years, you'll be adjusting. Learning to control your strength, your speed, your senses. Learning to navigate vampire society as one of us rather than an observer. Learning what it means to be my consort." She reached out, taking my hand. Her skin no longer felt cold to me. We were the same temperature now, both of us existing in that space between life and death. "And eventually, when you're ready, you'll find your purpose. What you want to contribute to our world." "I already know," I said, the certainty surprising me. "I want to document it. All of it. Create a true history of supernatural society, not the mythology humans believe but the actual truth. A record for future vampires, for scholars, for anyone trying to understand what we are." Serafina's eyes widened slightly, then she smiled, that genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "A chronicler. A keeper of truth. That's perfect. We've never had one, not really. Just scattered accounts and biased histories. You could create something invaluable. With your help," I added. "You've lived through centuries I'll need to understand. Your memories, your perspective, their primary sources." "A researcher to the end," she said with amusement. "Or rather, to the beginning. Your new beginning." She stood, pulling me up with her. "Come. There's one more thing you need to see tonight." We climbed back through the castle and I marveled at how natural movement felt now. My body responded with perfect precision, every step calculated and effortless. We reached the highest tower, the same observation deck where Serafina had first shown me the estate from above. But now, with vampire vision, I could see everything. Every building in Raven's Hollow, every tree in the forest, every star in the sky burning with impossible brilliance. The world was vast and detailed and achingly beautiful in ways my human eyes had never been able to perceive. "This is what you chose," Serafina said softly, standing beside me at the parapet. "Not just immortality but this. The ability to see the world as it truly is. To exist in it fully with all your senses awakened. To have time, endless time, to explore, to learn, to create something meaningful." I felt tears threatening, though I wasn't sure vampires could cry. "I was so afraid," I admitted. "That night at the banquet when I realized what I'd done. I thought my life was over." "It was," she said. "Your mortal life ended. But this life, our life, it's just beginning." She turned to face me fully, and in the starlight, her crimson eyes glowed with something I'd been too frightened or too overwhelmed to recognize before. Not just interest or curiosity. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like hope. "I need to tell you something," she said, and for the first time since I'd met her, she sounded uncertain. "I didn't choose to uphold the bonding claim just because you interested me. I chose it because when you looked at me that first night, terrified but still trying to understand, still asking questions even while facing death, I saw something I'd thought was lost to me forever." "What?" I asked, barely breathing despite not needing to. "Possibility." The word hung between us like a prayer. For 600 years I've known exactly what to expect from every day. Combat, politics, duty, endless repetition. But you represented change. Unknown variables. The chance that something new could still happen in my eternal existence. She stepped closer. I was lonely, Callum. So lonely I'd stopped recognizing it as loneliness. And then you stumbled into my world and reminded me what it felt like to be surprised. To be curious. To want to wake up and see what happens next. My undead heart, which would never beat again, somehow felt like it was breaking and healing simultaneously. I thought I was just a distraction. A temporary entertainment. "You were never temporary," she said firmly. "From the moment I decided to uphold the claim, I was committed. Not to a month but to centuries. To eternity." Her hand came up to cup my face, and the touch sent electricity through my new supernatural nerves. "You chose this life. Chose me. Chose us. That means everything." I leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and kissed her. It was my first kiss as a vampire, and it was nothing like human kissing. Every sensation was amplified. The coolness of her lips, the way our supernatural energies recognized each other, the bond between maker and progeny resonating like a tuning fork. It was intimate in ways that transcended physical touch, a connection that went soul deep. When we pulled apart, she was smiling. "Welcome home, Callum Archer. Welcome to forever." The library had become my sanctuary, just as it had been for Nadia. But now I occupied a new section, one we'd created together specifically for my project. The True Chronicles, I called it. A comprehensive history of supernatural society written from the inside, with academic rigor and unflinching honesty. I sat at my desk, a dozen books floating around me, a trick Nadia had taught me that required minimal magic and mostly just vampire telekinesis, writing in a journal that would eventually become the first volume. My handwriting was different now, more precise, more elegant, the product of supernatural control over fine motor skills. "Still at it?" Serafina's voice came from the doorway. She leaned against the frame, wearing her training gear, obviously just back from morning patrol. "You've been here for 8 hours straight." "Time moves differently now," I said, looking up with a smile. 8 hours feels like 20 minutes. I'm starting to understand what you meant about immortality changing your perspective. She crossed the room, looking over my shoulder at the pages I'd filled. "The Crimson Winter of 1847, she read aloud. "You're writing about the war. Your account of it needed to be recorded properly. Not as propaganda or legend, but as truth. The complexity of it. The cost." I set down my pen. "I interviewed 5 vampires who fought in it, including you. Each perspective was different, but they all agreed on one thing: it was necessary but terrible. That paradox needs to be preserved." "My consort, the historian," she said with affection, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "How did I get so lucky?" "You sat next to a confused human who didn't know any better," I reminded her. "Best mistake you ever made," she countered. "Best choice I ever made," I corrected. I was confused, yes. Terrified, absolutely. But some part of me, the part that spent years studying your world, recognized an opportunity. A chance to step through the veil instead of just studying it from the outside. Nadia appeared in the doorway, her amber eyes dancing with amusement. "You two are disgustingly sweet, you know that? 6 months of vampire domesticity and you're like an old married couple." "We are married," Serafina pointed out. "The bonding ritual is more binding than any human ceremony." "Still disgusting," Nadia said cheerfully. "Anyway, I came to tell you that Lord Matthias wants to see you both. Something about a situation in the Eastern Territories that requires attention." Serafina's expression shifted immediately to warrior mode. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that needs your specific skills. And possibly Callum's research expertise." Nadia shrugged. "He didn't give me details, just said to bring you both to the council chamber." 20 minutes later, we stood before Serafina's father in the formal council chamber. Lord Matthias looked as ancient and powerful as ever, but I no longer felt the overwhelming terror I'd experienced at our first meeting. I was vampire now, part of the family, and while he still commanded respect, it was respect born of admiration rather than fear. "A situation has developed in Prague," Lord Matthias explained, unrolling a map on the council table. "A newly turned vampire is creating problems, killing indiscriminately, drawing attention. The local coven has requested assistance from someone with authority and skill to handle it without causing further incident." "You want me to hunt down and eliminate a rogue vampire?" Serafina said flatly. "This is standard work. Why call us both here?" "Because," Lord Matthias continued, his crimson eyes shifting to me, "the vampire in question was turned by an academic researcher who claimed to be studying vampire transformation for scientific purposes. The situation has ethical complications that require more than just combat solutions. Callum's perspective, as both a former researcher and a newly turned vampire, might provide insights into how to resolve this without simply executing everyone involved." I felt the weight of responsibility settle onto my shoulders. This was it. My first real test as a vampire, my first opportunity to contribute beyond scholarly documentation. What do you need from me? Go with Serafina to Prague. Investigate the situation. Determine if there's a way to salvage the newly turned vampire or if elimination is the only option. And document everything. If vampires are beginning to approach transformation as a scientific study rather than a sacred ritual, we need to understand the implications for our society. Serafina looked at me, a question in her eyes. This would be dangerous. I was still young by vampire standards, barely 6 months into immortality. But I nodded. This was what I'd chosen, not a safe existence but a meaningful one. We'll leave tonight, Serafina told her father. And we'll handle it properly. As we prepared for the journey, I found myself standing once again on the balcony overlooking Thornhaven's gardens. 6 months ago, I'd stood here as a terrified human contemplating an impossible choice. Now I stood here as a vampire, about to embark on my first real mission, with a partner I loved and a purpose that gave shape to immortality. Serafina joined me, 2 travel bags slung over her shoulder. Ready? I thought about that question. Was I ready? Ready to face danger, to navigate the complex ethics of vampire justice, to step fully into the role I'd chosen? No, I said honestly. But I'm willing. And I'm not alone. She smiled, taking my hand. That's the secret, you know. To surviving immortality. You don't do it alone. You find someone who makes eternity feel less like a burden and more like an adventure. Is that what I am? I asked. Your adventure? You're my partner, she corrected. My equal. My choice. She pulled me toward the door. Now come on. Prague awaits and we have a rogue vampire to deal with. Your first field mission as a vampire scholar warrior. How's that for a career change from graduate student? I laughed, a sound that came easier now, more natural. Significant upgrade in excitement level, I'll admit. As we left Thornhaven Estate, heading into the night that was no longer frightening but familiar, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A mysterious invitation. A catastrophic seeding mistake. A month of impossible choices. Death and rebirth. And now, an eternity of purpose stretching ahead. I'd sat in the wrong seat at a vampire banquet and ended up engaged to their deadliest princess. It should have been the end of my story. Instead, it was the beginning of everything. The night embraced us as we traveled, 2 vampires moving through the darkness with purpose and partnership. Behind us, Thornhaven stood eternal and watchful. Ahead, Prague and its mysteries waited. And between the two, between past and future, we existed in the perfect present moment, where every choice had led to exactly where we were meant to be. I was Callum Archer. Vampire. Scholar. Consort to Serafina Drakenmore, keeper of the true chronicles, and my immortal life had only just begun.